The morning of my wedding, I was sitting on the cold bathroom floor of the bridal suite, still in my robe, staring at a text message on my phone that made my hands shake. It wasn't from my fiancé, Derek. It was from his best friend, Marcus, and it said 7 words that I will never forget for the rest of my life. Olivia, I need to talk to you. Now. I want to tell you everything, from the very beginning, because none of what happened that Saturday morning in June made sense without the months that came before it. And I think if you've ever loved someone who made you feel small, or ever questioned whether you were being seen for who you really are, then this story is going to hit you somewhere deep. My name is Olivia Hartman. I'm 26 years old, and at the time all of this happened, I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina, working as a marketing coordinator for a mid-size healthcare company downtown. I had a good life. A quiet apartment with a little balcony where I grew tomatoes in the summer. A close group of girlfriends. A mother who called me every Sunday morning without fail. And a fiancé named Derek Cole, who I had been with for 3 years and who I believed, with everything in me, was the man I was going to spend my life with. I was wrong, but the way I found out and what happened because of it changed me, in ways I still feel every single day. Derek and I met at a mutual friend's birthday party when I was 23. He was charming in that easy, natural way that some people just are. He laughed loudly, remembered everyone's names, and had this habit of leaning in when you talked to him, like what you were saying was the most important thing in the room. I fell for him fast. Too fast, honestly, but at 23, fast feels like fate. For the first year and a half, everything was good. Not perfect, but genuinely good. We argued sometimes, the way couples do, but we always found our way back. He was attentive, he was present. He told me he loved me like he meant it. Then things shifted. Slowly, the way a house settles, you don't notice the cracks until they're too big to ignore. It started around the time I got a promotion at work. I went from marketing coordinator to senior brand strategist, which came with a significant raise and a lot more visibility in the company. I was proud of myself. I had worked hard for it. My mom cried when I told her. My best friend, Camille, took me out for dinner to celebrate. Derek said, "That's cool, babe," and went back to watching TV. I told myself he was just tired. He was going through a slow period at his own job. He worked in sales for a construction supply company, and I knew it was a sensitive subject, so I gave him grace. I kept giving him grace, month after month, as the comments started. Little things at first. "You're always working. You think you're better than everyone now that you got that promotion. I don't know why you make such a big deal out of everything." The kind of comments that, in isolation, sound like nothing. But when they stack up, one on top of the other, day after day they start to weigh on you. I began to notice that Derek spoke differently about money when it came to me versus when it came to him. If I suggested a vacation, he'd say we couldn't afford it. But then he'd spend $300 on a weekend trip with his friends without mentioning it to me until after. If I bought something for myself, a new coat, a nice candle, anything, he'd make a comment about how I was frivolous. But if he wanted something, it was a necessity. I started to wonder, not loudly at first, just a quiet little whisper in the back of my mind. Does he love me, or does he love what I provide? I pushed the thought away. We got engaged 8 months before the wedding. He proposed at a restaurant in uptown Charlotte, got down on one knee, and the whole place clapped. It was beautiful. I said yes, and I meant it. I wanted to mean it. But the whisper got louder. About 4 months before the wedding, I made a decision. I know some people will think it was wrong of me. I know it looked like a test, and I guess it was. But I needed to know. I needed to be sure. Because I was about to stand in front of our families and our friends and make a promise before God, and I could not make that promise if I wasn't certain of what I was promising myself to. I told Derek that my company was restructuring and that my position had been eliminated. I told him I had been laid off. I kept the story simple. I said I had a few weeks of severance and that I was going to start job hunting, but that it might take a while. I said I was scared. I said I might need to cut back on some of the wedding expenses I had been covering. The look on his face when I said that last part, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Something I had never seen before and hoped I was imagining. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What does that mean for the venue deposit?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We'll figure this out together." Not even, "I'm sorry, that's really stressful." Just, "What does that mean for the venue deposit?" I told him I might need him to cover it. It was a few $1,000s. He made a face like I had asked him to hand over a kidney. Over the next 2 weeks, the man I thought I knew became someone I barely recognized. He started making comments about how I needed to get serious about finding work. He criticized how I spent my days. He questioned whether I was really trying or just being lazy. One evening, after I mentioned I'd had a hard day emotionally, he told me that I needed to toughen up because life doesn't care about feelings. Then came the night that broke something inside me. We were sitting at dinner I had cooked. I always cooked, and I mentioned that I was feeling anxious about money, and that maybe we should talk about the wedding budget. Derek put down his fork and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on a person I loved. He said, "Honestly, Olivia, I don't know what you bring to this relationship right now. You're not working, you're not contributing. I'm supposed to just carry everything?" I didn't say anything for a moment, I just looked at him. He kept going. He said that he had been thinking and that maybe we moved too fast, that he wasn't sure the timing was right, that he needed a partner, not someone he had to take care of. He called me useless, not loudly, not with cruelty in his voice, which somehow made it worse. He said it the way you'd note that a pen was out of ink. Flat, casual. Like it was just a fact. I went to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub and cried silently for 15 minutes. Then I washed my face and came back out. I did not tell him the truth that night. I knew then that I needed to see how far this would go. Over the following weeks, Derek pulled back from the wedding planning. He started making excuses. He questioned whether we should postpone. He said he was under too much financial pressure to focus on a wedding. He was irritable constantly. He barely touched me. He stopped saying I love you unless I said it first. Meanwhile, I went to work every day, sat in my office, ran campaigns, managed a team, and came home and acted like a woman who was drowning. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Camille knew the truth. My mom knew, but no one else did. And through all of it, the one person who checked on me, genuinely checked on me, was Marcus. Marcus Webb was Derek's best friend since college. They had grown up in different states but met freshman year at NC State, and had been inseparable since. Marcus was a quiet, thoughtful man. A high school history teacher in Raleigh. He was the kind of person who actually listened when you talked and asked follow-up questions the next time he saw you, because he remembered what you'd said. He texted me one afternoon, out of the blue, asking if I was doing okay. He said Derek had mentioned I lost my job, and that he just wanted me to know he was rooting for me. I almost told him everything right then, but I didn't. I just said thank you and that I appreciated him. 3 weeks before the wedding, Derek sat me down and said he wanted to talk. He had this prepared look on his face, like he'd been rehearsing. He told me that he had been doing a lot of thinking, and that with everything going on, the financial stress, the uncertainty about my career, he thought we should seriously consider calling off the wedding. Not breaking up, he said, just postponing. I asked him to be honest with me. I asked him if the only reason he wanted to marry me was because of my income, and what I contributed financially. He got defensive immediately. He said that wasn't fair, that I was twisting his words, that he was just being realistic. But he never actually answered the question. I told him I needed a few days to think. That night I called Camille and cried real tears, not because I was surprised, but because having a suspicion confirmed is its own kind of grief. You spend so long hoping you're wrong, and then you find out you weren't, and instead of feeling vindicated you just feel tired. I made a decision. I was going to go through with the wedding as planned. I was going to let the day come. And at some point, before we said our vows, I was going to tell Derek the truth. I was going to let him know that I had never lost my job, that I had staged the whole thing. And I was going to do it in front of everyone we loved. Not to humiliate him. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't doing it out of cruelty. I was doing it because I needed the people in my life to understand what had happened. I needed Derek to understand. And honestly, I needed to understand it fully myself. Saying it out loud, in the light, felt necessary. What I did not plan for was Marcus. The morning of the wedding, I was in the bridal suite at the venue, a beautiful old estate outside of Charlotte, surrounded by magnolias, and I was sitting with Camille and my cousin Bree, and everything was going through the motions. Hair and makeup, champagne I couldn't really drink because my stomach was in knots, my mother fussing with my veil, and then my phone buzzed. Marcus, Olivia, I need to talk to you. Now. I stepped out into the hallway, still in my robe. My heart was pounding. He was standing at the end of the corridor, still in his dress shirt, tie not yet knotted. He looked uncomfortable in the way that genuinely decent people look when they're about to say something hard. He said, "I don't know how to do this, so I'm just going to say it. Derek told me last night that he's been thinking about calling off the wedding. Not the way he told you where it was about the stress and the money. He told me the real reason." I waited. Marcus exhaled slowly. He said that Derek had told him over drinks the night before that he didn't think I was the right fit anymore. That since I lost my job, he had started seeing me differently, that he had been building a specific vision of his life, and I no longer matched it financially. He said Derek had used the phrase and Marcus repeated it quietly, like it pained him to say it, I need a woman who adds value. I closed my eyes for a second, then I opened them and I told Marcus the truth. I told him everything, the whole plan, the fake layoff, the test, what Derek had said to me over those weeks, the word he had used, useless. Marcus was quiet for a long time, his jaw tightened. He looked down at the floor, then back up at me. He said, Olivia, I have loved Derek like a brother for 12 years, and I need you to know that the man you just described to me is not the man I thought I knew. I told him that I wasn't sure I could go through with the ceremony, that I had planned to say something before the vows, but now I was standing in a hallway in a robe, and I felt completely unraveled. He asked me one question. He said, What do you want? Not what do you think you should do, what do you actually want? I thought about it. And I said, I want people to know what happened, I want the truth in the room. Marcus nodded slowly. He said, Then let it happen. Get dressed, walk down that aisle, and trust me. I don't know why I trusted him, but I did. I got dressed, I let my mother fuss with my veil. I held Camille's hand while she told me I was beautiful. And I walked down that aisle toward a man who had called me useless, toward a future I no longer wanted, with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Derek was standing at the altar, and he looked nervous. Not nervous the way grooms look on their wedding day, the good kind, the overwhelmed with love kind. He looked like a man who was calculating something. The officiant began, the ceremony moved along, and when we reached the moment where guests may speak the old tradition, if anyone has cause why these two should not be wed, I watched Derek glance around the room like he was checking exits. Marcus stood up. The room went completely still. Marcus was the best man. He was supposed to stand beside Derek. Instead, he was standing in the middle of the aisle, and every single person in that room turned to look at him. He said, in a calm and steady voice that filled the whole space, I love Derek. He's been my best friend since we were 18 years old. And that is exactly why I can't stand here and watch this happen. Derek said his name, low, warning. Marcus kept going. He said that the night before, Derek had told him that he had been pulling away from Olivia since she lost her job, that he had questioned whether she was still worth marrying, that he had used words no man should ever use about the woman he's supposed to love, and that Marcus had spent all night thinking about whether to say something, and that he had decided he could not stay silent. He looked at me then, and he said, Olivia deserves to be with someone who wants her when she has nothing, not just when she has everything. The room was so quiet I could hear the magnolias brushing against the window glass. Then I spoke. I turned to Derek, and I told him in front of every person we loved, in front of both of our families, in front of the God we were supposed to be making vows to, that I had never lost my job, that it was a test, that I needed to know if he loved me, or if he loved what I provided, and that he had answered that question more clearly than I ever could have imagined. I told him that I heard the word he used, and that I wanted him to hear this. I am not useless. I am a woman who worked for everything she has, who loves generously and forgives too easily, and trusted the wrong person for too long. But I am not useless. Then I looked at the officiant and I said quietly, I'm so sorry, there won't be a wedding today. I walked back up the aisle. Camille grabbed my hand and walked beside me. My mother was crying, not sad tears, I could tell, the complicated kind. The kind that come when you're proud of someone and heartbroken for them at the same time. I did not look at Derek's face. I couldn't. Not because I was afraid of what I'd see, but because I was done looking to him for anything. That afternoon, while the caterers quietly began breaking things down, and guests said their awkward, kind goodbyes, Marcus found me sitting outside on a stone bench in the garden. He sat down beside me without saying anything for a while. The magnolias were still blooming. The sun was still shining. The world had absolutely no idea what had just happened. He said, How are you doing? I thought about it honestly, and I said, I feel like I just set down something that was very heavy. He nodded. That sounds about right. We sat there for another few minutes in the quiet, and then I thanked him, not just for speaking up, for the question he asked me in the hallway, for making me figure out what I actually wanted instead of just telling me what to do. He said, You already knew what you wanted, you just needed someone to believe you could do it. In the weeks that followed, Derek tried to reach out several times. First with anger, saying I had humiliated him, that I had manipulated him, that what I did was wrong. I didn't respond to those messages. Then, with what looked like remorse, saying he was sorry, that he had said things he didn't mean, that the stress had gotten to him. I thought about that for a long time. Stress does change people. I believe that. But stress doesn't create things that weren't already there. It just removes the filter. And what came out of Derek without a filter told me everything I needed to know. I did not respond to those messages either. My lease was up at the end of that summer, and I decided to move. Not far, just across town, to a brighter apartment with more windows and a bigger balcony. I planted tomatoes again. I started going to a therapist, which I should have done years earlier, and which I now recommend to every human being on the planet without hesitation. Camille and I took a trip to Asheville in the fall, just the two of us. And we hiked and ate well and laughed until we couldn't breathe. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I started to feel like myself again. Not the self that had been slowly diminished by someone else's limitations. The self that had been there before. The one who worked for what she had, who loved generously, who grew tomatoes and called her mom on Sunday mornings. I don't know if what I did was the right thing, staging the layoff. I've gone back and forth on it. Some people I told reacted with shock, even judgment, said I should have just talked to him, should have trusted him, shouldn't have manipulated the situation. And I understand that, I hold that. But I also know myself. I know that if I had sat Derek down and said, "I'm worried you're only with me for financial security," he would have said exactly the right thing. He was good at saying the right thing. What he couldn't do was live the right thing. And I needed to see him live. A few months after everything, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop in Raleigh. He was with a stack of papers essays he was grading. We sat and talked for 2 hours. He told me he and Derek hadn't spoken since the wedding, that Derek had been furious at him for a long time. I told him I was sorry. He said he wasn't. I don't know where things with Marcus go from here, or if they go anywhere at all. That's not really what this story is about. This story is about learning to trust the quiet feeling in your stomach when something isn't right. About understanding that love isn't only what someone says, it's what they do when the lights go out, and the money runs short, and all that's left is who you actually are. This story is about a woman who spent 3 years wondering if she was enough, and one morning decided, finally, that the question itself was wrong. The question was never whether I was enough, the question was whether he was. And on a Saturday morning in June, in a garden full of magnolias in Charlotte, North Carolina, surrounded by the people who loved me, I got my answer. And I walked away free. If you've ever stayed somewhere too long because leaving felt like losing, I hope this reminded you that walking away is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. Take care of yourself. You are not useless. You never were.